All right. So I wanted to try a slightly different video format. The ones I've been doing, I've been planning out a lot, but also not doing a very good job of planning out. And so I'm going to do this one a little more off the cuff and relaxed, and just sort of talk about an idea I had and execute it. So one thing that I want to do before we actually get into the 3D printing in class is to introduce the kids to the engineering and design process. And so I like to guide them through with an example that I carry out. I try to make it a real life example, as real as possible. And so for this year, what I did is I had a problem. My problem was that I would store books up there on top of the ledge, and they used to go stretching all across, but they would all fall over. There would be like the temperature changes, it would get humid, the books would curl, and they would just dump over the side. And so I needed a way to solve that. So this is the engineering design process that I use. Hopefully that's in frame. I'm not using selfie mode. And so the first thing we have to do is define the problem. And so my problem was easily defined. My books are not staying up on the wall. The next thing I had to do is learn about the problem itself, and how is it that I am going to solve that problem? What criteria and constraints do I have? What am I going to place on myself? And so my criterion constraints are: I have all of this cork board just all across my room, and I wanted a way to utilize that. And so that was that is how I learned a little bit more about my problem. The next thing was planning. I had to plan out my phase. So I wanted to use, because it's corkboard, I had to use thumbtacks. And so part of my plan was measuring these things out, designing like a very basic, like sketching out my idea. One thing that I talk to the kids about is that all ideas have to start with a sketch. I've had a few students already this year who have started to explore the engineering design process, and I can show you one student had, their problem was that they need to attach their tuner to their violin, and there was something that sort of existed that their tuner attached to, but it didn't open wide enough. And so they measured out the relevant measurements for their violin, for the parts that they wanted to reuse or utilize on the clip itself, and then they kind of went from there. So I held on to this because I'm going to be using that also as we get into the engineering design process as an example of like where you start. Every design starts with an illustration of it or a drawing. So after that, I did my first drawing, and then I had to figure out a way to test it. Now, the design that I ended up going with, I could not test it without actually doing a 3D drawing and printing it out. And so I designed 3 versions. The first version failed. The books it held the books upright too much. I don't know where I put the 2 prototypes I had. I may have thrown them away. So I'll put a link. I think I have the file still. And so I had to adjust that. And when I adjusted my drawing, before I adjusted my drawing, I tested it out in front of the students. So I didn't know if it worked or not. They got to see my failure when I saw my failure. What I ended up going with through a couple redesigns was something like this. And so I have my 2 spots for the thumbtacks. I have these which hold the book, and I ended up cutting this space out. And so the purpose of this is not about success or failure. The purpose of this is showing students how to navigate that engineering and design process. So I tried it, I made my prototype, I tested my prototype, And then I had to make that decision. Well, is it good enough or not? My first design wasn't good enough, so I had to go back up to the planning phase. And I adjusted it, I printed it, and I tested it again. And that's when I came up with this second version. And I mean, I was fairly surprised at how well it turned out. The file itself is available. The file itself is available on My Mini Factory. MyMiniFactory.com. I'll have the link down below. Ultimately, I like to expose the kids to the engineering design process a few times before we actually get into the big design competition that we will have actually in a couple weeks here. So thanks for watching. Hopefully this type of video is easier to digest. It's certainly easier for me to shoot and edit because I'm not going to edit it. So thanks for watching. Hit subscribe if you liked it. Leave a comment or a question in the comment if you want to. All right, toodaloo.